Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It is time for another Mealworms Q&A. For those of you who have not been through a Mealworms Q&A, what I'm going to do here is respond to some questions that I've received. Today I've got 7 questions from B. I'm responding via video to try to get more context into this, and because it's easier than me typing out a tremendously long response. So a little bit of selfishness there for me. And it's a good way to try to spread some information and knowledge about mealworms, to get folks some data they might need and some feedback. If you would like a similar response, shoot me an email, head to midwestmealworms.com, check out the Contact Us page. It's got my email. My name is Justin. It's got other ways to contact me eventually, since I'm the only one here. But I would love to respond to this. I really enjoy getting these questions and providing feedback. The only thing I ask is a bit of grace around my response time. B sent this back on October 17th, and it is October 30th. So I'm a one-person show here, lots of stuff going on, and so I work these in when I can. That being said, I've got my water, and I've got my questions. So to set this up, B is outside the U.S., so this individual is not inside the United States. Currently living somewhere not in the U.S. I don't like to disclose locations, but giving some context around not in the U.S. is helpful. Business ideas farming mealworms. Insect farming is a relatively new concept with limited information available, particularly regarding farming methods in the market. However, I believe that insect protein is poised to play a significant role in the future. I'm hoping not to bother you, but I have several questions and would be immensely grateful if you could assist me with them. It's not a bother, honest. As far as not a lot of information, I would advocate checking out LinkedIn. It sounds nerdy and geeky, but I have gotten a lot of interesting business connections via LinkedIn outside of the U.S., and now I'm starting to see them inside the U.S. And when I say that, I mean over like the last 4 or 5 years, and then the last year or so within the U.S. Things are starting to move a bit there. Folks are starting to open up a little bit. Not a lot in the U.S. We'll get there. But I would engage. I would advocate that you check out LinkedIn and start checking out keywords, mealworms, insects, mealworm farming, different things like that, and start seeing what's out there. There's some info. Some of it's kind of clickbaity. There's folks that have generated reports about the market. Okay, but it's information at least, and you can start connecting with folks all over the place. All right, question number 1. What is the consumption rate of substrate in each tray of adult mealworms? I came across a source that mentioned each adult mealworm consumes an amount equal to its weight daily. Is this information accurate? I don't know, but honestly, it doesn't matter. And let me explain why. So from the perspective of my farm here, what my goal is to create as much production with as little mechanical or automation or things that I can't control as possible, so that any general person who is handy with tools and can build things is able to piece together a mealworm farm. So there's lots of different ways to do that. My goal is to not use robots, automation, AI, things like that. I have tools. Like, it's not to say I'm not using technology. I have tools, but I don't rely on somebody else's software in this particular location. I'm able to just run it on my own, for lack of a better way of saying that. And so consumption rate of the adult larva in a lab, in a laboratory study, is one thing versus in a real world farm. And the only way to get your answer is to raise mealworms. Because the way that I raise them and the reasons I raise them in order to sell the live larvae and the live beetles may not be what your target is or what your goal is. And so my consumption rate could potentially be immensely different than yours. For example, I'm feeding wheat bran. If you're not going to feed wheat bran, right there, I would say our consumption rates are going to be different, right? And so regardless of what those consumption rates are, it doesn't matter, because what you need to do is tailor your processes for your rearing conditions. And what I mean by that is start raising them, start tinkering with them to get an idea of what it's going to take for your specific scenario. If you need that information just for a startup cost perspective, or like what your monthly costs are going to be, your operating expenses, use the data that you're getting, but just go with a grain of salt there, right? Like, take that for what it is, and until you actually do it in your farm with your substrates and your process, if you hydrate them once a week versus hydrating them 7 times a week, you're going to have different outcomes in how much feed they consume, right? So short answer is I don't know if they eat their weight daily. I haven't needed to try to get that information, and like I said, I don't know that it's important for what my goals are, and maybe what your goals are either. And we'll leave it at that. So give me some more context around that if there's something I missed. But that's my feedback on the first one there. Question number 2. On your website, I noticed you sell mealworms based on their counts rather than weights. Have you determined an average weight for adult mealworms? If so, would you happen to know the weight of 500? I ask because I've observed that in the mealworm market in the UK, they operate based on weight, and I would like to have a standardized unit for price comparison purposes. And one thing I did mention UK, doesn't mean this individual is in the UK. That's the market we're looking at, which is interesting. But yes, so in the US, live mealworms are sold by count rather than by weight. Dried mealworms are sold by weight. And so the weight of an adult mealworm, from what I have experienced in selling mealworms, there's not a agreed upon, this is what the size of a medium or a large mealworm is, or a small, and this is what the weight of those are. And so I don't know, but what I can tell you is that very similar to my first answer, this is dependent on your colony. So colonies will vary on the size for what a medium, large, or small mealworm is. Small, medium, large. And so the way to get those weights is more important than knowing what that is for each specific size, or if there's some mark you're trying to hit. So the way that I get weights on something is I will routinely do my harvest process using the screens that I use in order to collect the sizes that work for me that I sell. And then I go through and I will manually hand count 100 count batches. So I'll count 100, I'll weigh it. I'll count 100, I'll weigh it. I'll count 100, and I do that 10, 15, 20 times till I start seeing an average. And then I'll take that average for 100 and I'll multiply it. Let's say if I need an order of 500, I'll multiply it by 5, and then I'll add 10%. So that accounts for any potential variation there. And because I'm shipping mine, any potential die-off that might occur, there's just a little bit extra in there, right? But what I sell are 3/4 inches average mealworms that I would consider medium. And the reason I sell the mediums is because the large ones are very, 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 very prone to pupate unless you use some sort of chemical, or if there's a natural process. I haven't heard of one. Let's hear it, somebody. To keep them from pupating. So the mediums are far less apt to pupate. They will still do it, but folks are ordering mealworms, and so they don't want the pupa. So I go with the 3/4 inch average, and that's what I sell. Why there are differences in weights being used versus count in the U.S. That's just what I noticed, and so I followed that established pattern already. Customers were used to, if they're buying live mealworms, they're buying by count. If they're buying dehydrated, they're buying by weight. That has helped me personally from my business adventure, because when someone reaches out and says, "Hey, do you have 5 pounds of mealworms?" I'm 90% confident that they're asking about dried or dehydrated mealworms. And so I'll respond and say, "I sell live mealworms by count. Are you by chance looking for dehydrated?" So there is some benefit to that. I don't think, honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You want to look at the markets that you're trying to sell to and what might already be established there in order to figure out, are you selling by count or by weight? Okay. Number 3, how frequently do you separate the larva from the beetles? Is this done on a weekly basis? I do it on a weekly basis now. Before I was doing just mealworms, when this was a side gig, up until 2 years ago, I would do the beetle swap, as I call it, once every 2 weeks. You could do it more frequently if you wanted to. It just depends on how much time you have available and what your goal is. So again, my goal is to sell those larvae, and what I'm trying to do to make that as operationally efficient as possible is to get the larvae to be similar sizes in the tray. so that they age and get to the point where they can be harvested at around the same time. You need to look into some research around how much mealworms or how much the beetles will lay eggs, the density at which they'll do it. It's actually a curve. They'll lay a lot of them early on and it tapers off, and then it really tapers off. After 2 to 3 months, they're basically spent from a farming perspective. They'll lay 95% of their eggs in the first 2 to 3 months in optimal conditions. And so I do it every week now. It takes me about 2 hours or so. And what I'll do is, the reason I'm doing it more frequently is to try to get more consistency in the size of the mealworms in the bins so that they finish at the same time, so I can collect them at the same time, they can be fed the same amount, etc. But that's a flexible metric there. You could do that at different times. Okay. Number 4. I'm interested in obtaining tangible information about production rates from someone involved in commercial scale farming. What is your monthly production rate? How many trays do you currently utilize? I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to give you a preemptive. Don't base your business plan around this data. I cannot stress that enough. Okay. I'm hesitant to even give some of this information out because I don't want you basing that on your reality. This is just my information here with the way that I raise things. Okay. So right now, with approximately 1,700 Beacon Camp trays, I'm producing 1 million mealworms a month. I'm also producing more beetles than I need. And so I'm taking larvae from on top of that. So 1 million is what I'm producing that is sellable, that goes out the door. I've got another 20% that I keep in-house for pupating and then to get to beetles. I also sell those beetles. So there's that aspect to it. But that's my current monthly production rate. That being said, you could have a completely different outcome if you're not using Beacon Camp trays, if you're not hydrating 3 times a week like I am, if you're hydrating more. So take that information with a grain of salt. Okay? Number 5, in terms of operational costs, what has the most significant impact on your expense? For me in the United States, labor cost. Labor cost, 100%. Trays are expensive, but they last. So utilizing plastic trays, those things last years and years. I've not had issues. I've broken 2 of the Beacon Camp trays in the 2 or 3 years that I've had them. The plastic dough proofing trays I use are really sturdy. Those things, those initial upfront costs over time, the ROI is very good. They pay for themselves. My biggest cost is labor, 100%. My next biggest cost is probably substrate. So wheat bran, that would be it. And probably after that is electricity. So HVAC, things like air conditioning, heating, running the fans. Those are the probably the next biggest thing. And then I have a rent release on this building as well. But labor far outweighs all of those to a huge degree from an operating cost perspective. Number 6. Have you ever collaborated with research parties to utilize the data you have gathered? No, but I would be open to do that. So I am a person that likes to share that information because when I first started this 8 years ago now, 9 years ago, this information wasn't readily available. And in the U.S., corporations are very closed-mouthed, tight-lipped. They're not talking about what they're doing because there's so much riding on the financial aspect. And we won't go into that. It's a whole cultural thing in the U.S. I will share anything. I'm right now talking with a couple places to perform some research that part of the stipulation is that it is publicized and that it is distributed and anyone can access it, right? Because we need to get more information out there around how to practically do this. The big corporations have their paths, then they have their purpose. They're there. But their goals are far different than my goal or the goals of folks who want to have small insect farms. And so I am 100% open to collaborating with folks who want to look at that information, study it, analyze it, utilize it, figure something out in order to release it so that it is generally available to everyone. Number 7. Number 7, last one. I have noticed that mealworm powder is priced much lower than live mealworms in the UK. This seems counterintuitive considering that approximately 51% of a mealworm's weight is moisture. Have you encountered this phenomenon? If so, how do you explain it? Well, I'm going to read that again. I've noticed that mealworm powder is priced much lower than live mealworms in the UK. This seems counterintuitive. It is more my hot take on this, not knowing about the pricing in the UK. My hot take would be that the operational processes required to produce live insects and get them from where they are here, sorted, sifted, and prepared, packaged, shipped, and to a customer are what are dictating the price. Because you have to do that on an order basis. Whereas with mealworm powder, what you're doing is you are mass producing those insects. Well, let me take that back. You are producing those insects, and then at the end of their growth, once they're optimal size, you can take that entire tray. You don't have to sift separate sizes. You will find that some dehydrated mealworms that are sold whole are various sizes. Some are one size. Some aim to have one size for consistency. But if you're making powder out of it, you're just going to take that entire tray, sift the frass out, and then grind everything, dry it up and grind it up. So your process is very, very different. So you're going to have less operational cost, less labor for that, because it's going to take less time to complete that action. And then you can store that for a much longer time period than you can store live mealworms in the state they need to be utilized in. So I think all those things combined are going to increase the cost of live mealworms. In the U.S., what I have noticed about live and dried is that from a small business perspective, most of the dried mealworms that are on sale or that are for sale are from external countries imported into the U.S. I cannot compete with prices of imported dried mealworms. I can compete with live because for external countries to import into the U.S., there's a whole bunch of regulatory stuff that they have to pass and pay for. And in order to get live from external, I'll go with the UK since you're looking at the UK market. If we have to go from the UK into the US, you're looking at a very short time frame to get live. It's got to be on a plane. It's not going to make it on a boat. And so that's expensive. And so I think that's probably another potential reason why the powder is more cost effective is because you don't have those limitations, right? You can put that thing in a package, put it in a box, put it on a boat, and it can take its time to get from point A to point B. Yeah. And I sounded a bit, I don't know, harsh about the imported products. That's probably the topic for another longer video, because, and I mentioned this on a previous question around how we're just going to park that, finance and cultural thing. Similar scenario, like the costs that I have to produce in the smaller quantities that I produce here, small being relative, it's just not financially feasible. That being said, if we had a bunch of small farms and we had a centralized processing location, that would be really cool. I would really like to explore that with somebody here in the U.S. if anybody's wanting to do that. But yeah, so hopefully this gave you some good feedback. If I missed the mark on any of these questions or interpreted incorrectly, please let me know. Reach out to me again. And anyone who's watching this who would like to get some feedback in a similar style, please shoot me an email. Head to MidwestMealworms.com and check out the Contact Us page. I used to post my email address in various places, and what I'm finding is now I am spammed by way too much stuff. So I'm going to start pointing people to that contact us page. It's got my email. It's going to come direct to me. And then if you'd like a video response, please let me know. And any other information. I'm not going to share personal info unless there's something contextual in there that needs to be talked about or that you want to be talked about. So thank you all for tuning in. Have a good one.